The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the community center in South London as Prince William stepped out of his official car. He straightened his casual blue shirt and took a deep breath. Today was different from his usual royal engagements. No red carpets, no formal speeches, and definitely no protocol officers hovering nearby with clipboards. The building looked ordinary from the outside. Brick walls, simple glass doors, and a small sign that read Riverside Community Center. Inside, however, something extraordinary was about to happen. The future King of England was about to participate in a comedy workshop designed to help young people build confidence and social skills. William had heard about this program through his mental health charity work. The workshop used humor and games to break down barriers between people from different backgrounds. When his team suggested he visit, William immediately said yes. But when the organizers mentioned he might participate rather than just observe, something sparked in his eyes. "I think I'd quite like to have a go," he had told his private secretary, much to everyone's surprise. The workshop leader, Sarah Mitchell, had been running these sessions for over 10 years. She had worked with teenagers from tough neighborhoods, adults with social anxiety, and even corporate executives who needed to loosen up. But never had she guided a future king through improv exercises. "Just treat him like anyone else," she had instructed her team of volunteers. "The whole point is that humor makes us all equal." As William entered the main room, he saw about 20 young people aged 16 to 25 sitting in a circle on colorful bean bags and folding chairs. Some looked nervous, others excited, and a few seemed to be wondering what they had gotten themselves into. The room buzzed with quiet conversations and nervous laughter. Sarah clapped her hands together. "Right, everyone, let's begin. Today we're going to explore how comedy can help us connect with others and build our confidence. And we have a very special participant joining us." William raised his hand slightly and grinned. "Hello, everyone. I'm William, and I'm absolutely terrified." The ice broke immediately. Several participants laughed, and one young woman named Zara called out, "Don't worry, we all are." The first exercise was simple. Everyone had to introduce themselves with their name and one unusual fact. The catch was that half the facts had to be lies, and the group would guess which ones were true. When it came to William's turn, he stood up and cleared his throat dramatically. "I'm William. I once got stuck in a toilet at Buckingham Palace and had to be rescued by security, and I'm secretly terrified of swans." The room erupted in giggles. A young man named Marcus raised his hand. "The toilet story has to be true. Nobody would make that up about themselves." "Actually," William said with a mischievous smile, "both of those are completely true. I was 8 when the toilet thing happened, and swans are genuinely terrifying. Have you seen their wings when they're angry?" Sarah moved them into the next exercise. They split into pairs for a mirroring game where one person would make slow movements and their partner had to copy them exactly. William was paired with 18-year-old Keisha, who had initially seemed shy but was now grinning widely. "You lead first," William said. "I have a feeling you're going to make me look ridiculous." Keisha started with simple arm movements, but soon had William pretending to swim through invisible honey, then mime climbing an imaginary ladder while balancing on one foot. The entire room was watching and laughing as the future king wobbled and nearly fell over trying to maintain perfect synchronization with his teenage partner. "Your turn," Keisha said, still giggling. William thought for a moment, then began an elaborate mime of making tea. But his version involved incredibly exaggerated posh movements, holding his pinky finger so high it nearly touched his ear, and lifting an imaginary teacup with such ceremony that Keisha had to bite her lip to keep from bursting out laughing while copying him. "Is this how you actually drink tea?" she whispered. "God, no," William whispered back. "But it's how everyone thinks I drink tea." The morning progressed through various exercises. They did emotional weather reports where participants had to describe their feelings as if they were forecasting rain or sunshine. William announced that he was experiencing scattered anxiety with a chance of dad jokes later in the day. They played a game called Yes and, where each person had to build on someone else's idea without rejecting it. When one participant suggested they were all astronauts on Mars, William immediately jumped in with, "Yes, and I forgot to pack enough sandwiches for the journey, so we'll have to survive on space dust and optimism." But it was during the trust exercises that something deeper began to happen. The group had to stand in a circle and take turns sharing something they were genuinely worried about. The rules were simple. No advice, no trying to fix anything, just listening and acknowledging each other's concerns. Marcus talked about his anxiety over job interviews. Zara mentioned her fear of starting university. When it came to William's turn, the room went quiet. Everyone expected something polite and carefully prepared. Instead, William was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I worry that I'll never be as good at this job as my grandmother was. She made it look so easy, but I feel like I'm constantly learning and making mistakes." The honesty in his voice surprised everyone, including himself. Sarah nodded approvingly. This was exactly the kind of authentic moment the workshop was designed to create. After the trust circle, Sarah announced it was time for the main event. They were going to play an adapted version of Guess Who, but instead of using the traditional board game cards, they would use photos of celebrities, historical figures, and even some of themselves. The twist, Sarah explained, is that you can only ask yes or no questions, but they have to be completely ridiculous questions. Nothing normal like, do they have brown hair? Instead, think, would this person be likely to fight a pigeon over a sandwich? The group was divided into teams of 4. William found himself teamed with Keisha, Marcus, and a quiet young man named James, who had barely spoken all morning but had been smiling throughout the exercises. Sarah held up the first photo for William's team to guess. It showed a stern-looking historical figure with a large mustache and military uniform. "Right team," William said, taking charge in a way that felt natural but not commanding. "First question, James, what do you think?" James, encouraged by the relaxed atmosphere, surprised everyone by asking, "Would this person be good at karaoke?" The room dissolved into laughter at the mental image. Sarah, trying to keep a straight face, considered the question seriously. "You know what? Looking at that confident expression, I think yes." Keisha jumped in next. "Would this person cry at romantic movies?" "Definitely not," Sarah replied immediately. Marcus added, "Would this person be the type to steal biscuits from the office kitchen?" "Oh, absolutely," Sarah said, nodding gravely. "This person has biscuit thief written all over them." It was William's turn to ask a question. He studied the photo intently, then his face lit up with mischief. "Would this person," he began, trying to keep his voice steady, "be the sort to get into an argument with a self-checkout machine at the supermarket?" The question was so specific and unexpected that the entire room burst into laughter. Even Sarah had to pause her role as quizmaster to wipe tears from her eyes. "Yes," she managed to say between giggles. "Yes, this person would definitely lose their temper at a self-checkout machine and then argue with the teenage employee who came to help." The team spent several more minutes asking increasingly absurd questions. Would this person wear socks with sandals? Would they sing in the shower? Would they be afraid of butterflies? By the time they correctly guessed the figure was a famous Victorian general, the entire room was in stitches, and William was wiping away tears of laughter. But the real moment came during the second round. This time, Sarah held up a photo that made William's eyes widen in recognition. It was a formal portrait of his own grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, in her ceremonial robes and crown. The room went silent for a moment as everyone realized what had happened. William looked at the photo of his grandmother, then at his teammates, then back at the photo. A slow grin spread across his face. "Right then," he said, his voice full of mischief. "This should be interesting." Keisha was the first to recover from the surprise of seeing the Queen's portrait in their game. She glanced at William, who was still grinning at the photo, then back at the image of his grandmother in full regalia. "Well," she said slowly, "this is either going to be hilarious or we're all going to get arrested." William let out a bark of laughter. "Trust me, she would have found this absolutely hilarious. She had the best sense of humor of anyone I knew." Sarah, the workshop leader, watched this exchange with fascination. In 10 years of running these sessions, she had never seen anything quite like this. The usual dynamic would be for someone to feel awkward or embarrassed if a photo of their relative appeared. But William seemed genuinely delighted by the challenge. "Right team," William said, rubbing his hands together. "Who wants to go first?" James, who had been gaining confidence throughout the morning, raised his hand tentatively. "Would this person," he began, then paused and looked at William uncertainly. "Go on," William encouraged. "Ask whatever you want. She's fair game like everyone else." James took a deep breath. "Would this person be good at playing video games?" William considered this seriously, tilting his head as if consulting some internal database of royal gaming skills. "You know what? I think she actually would be. She was incredibly competitive and had excellent hand-eye coordination. She could probably dominate at racing games." The room erupted in giggles at the mental image of the Queen hunched over a gaming console, trash-talking opponents over a headset. Marcus jumped in next, emboldened by the laughter. "Would this person eat the last slice of pizza without asking?" William's response was immediate and emphatic. "Oh, absolutely not. She was raised on very strict sharing principles. She would cut it into pieces and make sure everyone got some, even if there were 20 people in the room." Keisha was next, and she had a gleam in her eye that suggested she was about to push the boundaries. "Would this person," she said slowly, "ever dance to pop music when nobody was watching?" William paused, and for a moment everyone thought he might deflect the question. Then his face broke into the biggest smile anyone had seen from him all day. "Actually," he said, "she loved dancing, and she had surprisingly good taste in music. I caught her humming along to a Kylie Minogue song once, and when I teased her about it, she said Kylie was rather catchy." The room was in complete hysterics now. The image of the Queen secretly enjoying pop music while doing royal duties was too wonderful for words. It was William's turn to ask a question about his own grandmother's photo. He studied the formal portrait for a moment, then looked around at his teammates with an expression of pure mischief. "Would this person," he said, building suspense with deliberate pauses, "get into trouble for making inappropriate jokes during serious meetings?" Sarah, who was supposed to be answering based on what she could guess from the photo, looked completely confused about how to respond. The other participants were watching William with fascination, realizing they were getting unprecedented insight into the real personality behind the public figure. "I'm going to say yes," Sarah finally answered, "because that smile in the photo suggests someone who definitely knew how to cause trouble." "Correct," William announced triumphantly. "She once made me laugh so hard during a state dinner that I nearly choked on my soup. The dignitary sitting next to me thought I was having some sort of medical emergency." The stories began flowing then. As they continued guessing other photos in the game, William found himself sharing anecdotes that painted a picture of royal life that none of these young people had ever heard before. When they were trying to guess a photo of a famous chef, William mentioned the time his grandmother had snuck down to the palace kitchens at midnight because she wanted to learn how to make proper scrambled eggs. She said she was tired of having other people cook for her and wanted to be able to make something herself. The kitchen staff were terrified they'd get in trouble, but she just put on an apron and started cracking eggs, During a round featuring a photo of a comedian, William revealed that his grandmother had once attended a comedy show secretly and laughed so hard that her security detail got worried she was having some sort of fit. She had to convince them she was fine while tears were streaming down her face from laughing. As the workshop progressed into the afternoon, something remarkable was happening. The initial nervousness had completely disappeared. The young participants were treating William exactly as they would any other teammate, teasing him when he made overly obvious guesses and celebrating when he came up with particularly clever questions. Marcus discovered that William was hopeless at guessing photos of reality TV stars. "How do you not know who this is?" Marcus demanded, showing him a picture of a famous influencer. "They have like 50 million followers." "I barely know how to use Instagram," William admitted. "My private secretary posts most of my photos, and I think I accidentally liked a picture of someone's lunch last week when I was trying to scroll." Keisha found it hilarious that William's pop culture knowledge stopped somewhere around 2010. When a photo of a current pop star appeared, he squinted at it and asked, "Is this person in a boy band?" "Sir," Zara said, using the formal address for the first time all day and immediately looking embarrassed. "That's a woman." "Oh," William said, completely unfazed. "Would this woman be in a boy band if boy bands accepted women?" The afternoon's most memorable moment came during what Sarah called emotion guess who. Instead of guessing the identity of people in photos, participants had to guess what emotion the person was feeling based on their facial expression. The photo Sarah held up showed a bride on her wedding day, but instead of the usual joyful expression, the woman looked absolutely terrified. "Your turn to start us off, William," Sarah said. William studied the photo carefully, then asked, "Is this person feeling the way I felt right before I had to give my first speech to Parliament?" "What's that feeling exactly?" Keisha asked. William thought for a moment. "Like you're about to throw up, but also like you're excited, but also like you want to run away and hide under a bed until everyone forgets you exist." "That's very specific," James observed. "That's politics," William replied with a straight face, which sent everyone into another fit of giggles. Marcus asked the next question. "Is this person feeling like they just realized they forgot something really important but can't remember what?" "Yes!" Sarah exclaimed. "That's exactly the expression." As they continued playing, the questions became increasingly creative and personal. Instead of asking generic emotional queries, the participants began relating feelings to their own experiences. Zara asked, "Is this person feeling like they do when their parents ask them what their 5-year plan is?" James contributed, "Is this person feeling like they do when they're in a lift with strangers and someone farts but nobody knows who did it?" William's emotional questions were surprisingly vulnerable. He asked things like, "Is this person feeling the way you do when everyone expects you to have all the answers, but you're just making it up as you go along?" And, "Is this person feeling like they love someone very much, but are worried they're not good enough for them?" Each question revealed something about the person asking it, and gradually the workshop transformed from a simple game into something deeper. The participants were sharing parts of themselves they rarely showed to strangers, and William was doing the same. The breakthrough moment came when Sarah held up a photo of an elderly man sitting alone on a park bench, looking contemplative. It was James's turn to ask a question, and he had been quiet for a few minutes, clearly thinking hard about something. "Is this person," he began slowly, "feeling the way you do when someone you love dies, but everyone expects you to be strong, so you can't show how sad you really are?" The room went very quiet. Sarah looked at the photo more carefully and nodded. "Yes, I think that's exactly what he's feeling." William looked at James with new understanding. "That's a very perceptive question, James." James shrugged, suddenly self-conscious again. "My dad died last year, Sometimes I think I'm the only one who feels that way. You're definitely not, William said quietly. I felt exactly like that when my mother died, and again when my grandmother died. It's like you're performing being okay for everyone else. The conversation that followed was unlike anything Sarah had experienced in her workshops. The game had created a safe space where a future king and a group of young people from very different backgrounds were sharing some of their deepest feelings about loss, expectation, and the pressure to appear strong. But just when things threatened to become too heavy, Keisha saved the moment with perfect timing. "Right," she announced. "The next photo better be someone looking happy, because we need some laughs after that emotional moment." Sarah, reading the room perfectly, held up a photo of a man in a chicken costume, grinning widely and giving 2 thumbs up. The room exploded in laughter, and William immediately raised his hand. "Is this person feeling the way I'm going to feel when I have to explain to my security detail why I spent the afternoon playing games with a photo of my grandmother?" The afternoon sun was beginning to slant through the windows of the community center as Sarah announced the final game of the day. She had saved the best for last, and judging by the energy in the room, she had timed it perfectly. "Right, everyone," she said, clapping her hands together. "We're going to end with our signature game. It's called Character Guess Who, and here's how it works." She explained that instead of using photos, each person would draw a character description from a hat. They would then have to act out that character while the others tried to guess who they were supposed to be. But they could only ask the ridiculous yes or no questions they had been practicing all day. "The catch," Sarah continued with a grin, "is that half of these characters are completely made up. So you might be trying to guess someone real, or you might be trying to guess someone like a vampire who's afraid of blood, or a pirate who gets seasick." William rubbed his hands together eagerly. "This sounds like trouble. I'm in." The first volunteer was Zara, who drew her slip of paper and immediately burst into giggles. She read it silently, then composed herself and stood in the center of the circle. She began acting out her character by pretending to trip over her own feet, then looking around suspiciously as if someone else had caused it. She mimed putting on invisible makeup while looking in a mirror, but kept making disgusted faces at her reflection. Marcus raised his hand. "Are you someone who would lose a fight with a houseplant?" Zara, staying in character, nodded enthusiastically while pretending to bandage an invisible wound. "Are you someone who would apologize to furniture after bumping into it?" Keisha asked. Another enthusiastic nod from Zara, who then demonstrated by walking into an imaginary table and bowing apologetically to it. William was studying her performance carefully. "Are you someone who would get nervous ordering pizza on the phone?" Zara's response was to mime holding a phone, dial a number, open her mouth to speak, then hang up quickly and hide under an imaginary blanket. "Are you a teenager who's convinced they're the most awkward person who ever lived?" James asked with a knowing smile. "Yes," Zara shouted, breaking character. "How did you guess so quickly?" "Takes one to know one," James replied, and everyone laughed. Marcus went next. His character slip made him stand very straight and stiff, then begin making exaggerated royal waves while looking extremely bored. He kept checking an invisible watch and sighing dramatically. The questions came quickly. "Are you someone who would rather be anywhere else right now?" "Yes." "Are you someone who has to smile even when you're dying of boredom?" "Yes." "Are you someone who waves at crowds for a living?" "Yes." William was grinning widely as he raised his hand. "Are you someone who's basically me on any given Tuesday?" Marcus nodded and everyone burst out laughing, including William, who seemed delighted by the impersonation. "That's terrifyingly accurate," William admitted. "Do I really look that bored during official engagements?" "Sometimes," Keisha said diplomatically. "You look like you're thinking about something much more interesting than ribbon cuttings." When it was James's turn, he drew his slip and immediately looked nervous. But as he read it, his face transformed into an expression of pure joy. He began acting out his character by flexing imaginary muscles, posing dramatically, and then attempting to lift something incredibly heavy, only to have it clearly be much lighter than expected, sending him stumbling backward. "Are you someone who talks about going to the gym but has never actually been?" Zara guessed immediately. James nodded while continuing to pose and flex. "Are you someone who buys protein shakes but uses them to make milkshakes instead?" William asked. James enthusiastically mimed drinking something delicious while flexing one arm. "Are you someone who tells people you're on a fitness journey but the only journey you've been on is to the biscuit tin?" Marcus added. James broke character to laugh. "How are you all so good at this?" It was Keisha's turn next, and her character made her immediately start looking around frantically, checking her pockets and making increasingly worried faces. She mimed typing on her phone, then throwing it down in frustration. "Are you someone who's just realized they've left the house without their phone?" William guessed. Keisha shook her head and continued her frantic searching. "Are you someone who can't remember if they locked the front door?" James tried. Another head shake, but Keisha's panic was escalating. "Are you someone who's just remembered they have an assignment due tomorrow that they completely forgot about?" Zara asked. "Yes," Keisha exclaimed, "and it's worth half my grade." Everyone groaned in sympathy, clearly recognizing the feeling. Finally, it was William's turn. Sarah handed him the slip of paper with a particularly mischievous smile. William read it, and his eyebrows shot up toward his hairline. "Oh, this is brilliant," he muttered, then looked up at the group. "Right, here we go." William began his performance by standing very formally, hands clasped behind his back. Then he started making exaggerated formal bows to imaginary people, but each bow got more and more elaborate until he was practically doing somersaults. Between bows, he would pause to take selfies with invisible crowds, making ridiculous faces at his imaginary phone. "Are you someone who takes their job very seriously but is secretly quite silly?" Marcus asked. William nodded while attempting an extremely formal wave that somehow turned into jazz hands. "Are you someone who has to be dignified in public but would rather be making people laugh?" Keisha guessed. Another nod, accompanied by William attempting to curtsy, which was both hilarious and surprisingly graceful. "Are you someone who wishes they could just be normal but has a very abnormal job?" Zara tried. William paused his performance to give her a very serious nod, then immediately ruined the moment by pretending to trip over his own feet. James raised his hand tentatively. "Are you someone who's exactly like you, but in an alternate universe where being royal means being a professional comedian?" William stopped mid-bow and stared at James. That's exactly what it says on the paper. How did you figure that out?" James grinned. "Because you've been making us laugh all day while being incredibly proper about it. It's like you're already living in that alternate universe." The room fell silent for a moment as everyone processed this observation. Then William started laughing, and it wasn't his polite public laugh or even the chuckles he had been sharing all day. This was deep, uncontrolled, genuine laughter that doubled him over and brought tears to his eyes. "Oh my God," he gasped between laughs. "That's the most accurate thing anyone's ever said about my life." His laughter was completely infectious. Soon everyone in the circle was laughing just as hard, though some of them weren't entirely sure why. The sound filled the community center, echoing off the walls and probably confusing anyone walking by outside. When the laughter finally subsided, Sarah stood up to address the group. "That, everyone, is exactly what we're trying to achieve here. You've just spent an afternoon proving that humor breaks down every barrier between people." She gestured around the circle. 6 hours ago, you were strangers from completely different backgrounds. Now you're a team that can read each other's thoughts and find the funny in everything. William wiped his eyes and looked around at the faces of his new teammates. This has been one of the best afternoons I've had in years. And I'm including my wedding day in that comparison. Better than your wedding? Zara asked, with mock concern. Should we be worried about your marriage? Catherine would absolutely understand, William replied. She married me because I make her laugh. She'd probably be jealous that she missed this. As the workshop officially ended, the participants lingered in the circle, clearly reluctant to return to their normal lives. The magic of the afternoon felt fragile, as if stepping outside might break the spell that had turned a future king into just William, and a group of nervous young people into a comedy troupe. Marcus was the first to acknowledge what everyone was thinking. This was amazing, but it feels weird going back to normal now. Like, tomorrow when I see you on the news, I'm going to remember you asking if my grandmother would fight a pigeon over a sandwich. Good, William said firmly. I hope you do remember that, because that's the real me, just as much as the person you see cutting ribbons and making speeches. Keisha looked around the group thoughtfully. We should do this again sometime. Maybe not with you, she added, pointing at William, because that might be hard to arrange. But this group, we should stay in touch. Actually, William said, pulling out his phone, I have an idea about that. He spent a few minutes typing, then looked up with satisfaction. I've just sent a message to my team. This community center is going to receive funding to run these workshops every month for the next 2 years, and if you want to keep coming, there will always be a spot for you. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Sarah looked like she might cry from happiness. There's one condition, though, William continued, holding up a finger. Promise me that if I ever get too serious or pompous in my official duties, one of you will remind me of today. Send me a message asking if I would lose a fight with a houseplant or something equally ridiculous. Deal, said James immediately. But you have to promise that if we ever see you on TV looking bored during a royal event, you'll think about us and try not to laugh. Oh no, William groaned. I'm never going to be able to keep a straight face again. Every time I'm at some serious state function, I'm going to remember Keisha making me mime swimming through honey. As the group finally began to pack up and prepare to leave, William found himself reluctant to return to the world of security details and official schedules. For one afternoon, he had been just another person in a circle, playing silly games and sharing honest feelings. Sarah approached him as the others were saying their goodbyes. Thank you for today. You gave those young people something they'll remember forever. William shook his head. They gave me something too. They reminded me that the best part of being human is being ridiculous sometimes. As he walked toward the exit, William could hear the others planning to meet for coffee the following week. They were already texting each other, sharing inside jokes from the workshop and making plans to attend the next session. Just before he reached the door, Zara called out to him. William, next time bring your wife. I bet she'd be good at this. William turned back with a grin. You know what? I think she'd absolutely love to guess whether Napoleon would cry at romantic movies. And with that, he stepped out into the late afternoon sunshine, still chuckling to himself and already planning how to convince Catherine to join him at the next workshop. His security detail was waiting by the car, looking slightly confused by their principal's unusually cheerful demeanor. Good afternoon, sir, his protection officer said as William approached. How was the community center visit? William paused before getting into the car and looked back at the building where he had spent the afternoon. Through the windows, he could see the others still inside, probably trying to guess what emotion he was feeling right now. It was exactly what I needed, he told his security detail, and I think I'm going to be giggling about it for weeks. As the car pulled away from the curb, William was already looking forward to explaining to Catherine why he couldn't stop smiling, and why he kept randomly chuckling every time he thought about whether his grandmother would have been good at video games. The afternoon had reminded him that Sometimes the most important thing a future king could do was simply be human, and that being human was almost always funnier than anyone expected.